In this tutorial, we will look at tuples in Python. Basically, a tuple is a type of data structure in Python that is similar to list but is immutable, meaning that its elements cannot be modified once it has been created. The first thing we look at is how to create a tuple. And to create a tuple, we have two methods. We can either use parentheses or we can use a tuple function. For example, we can use parentheses to create a tuple with three elements 1, 2, and 3. Or we can create a tuple using the tuple function with three elements, but these three elements first were in a list, and that list was converted to tuple using the tuple function. We can go ahead and print T1, and we can as well print out T2. So if we decide to do that, execute this, and you can as well execute that. So you see we have two tuples. And the next thing we're going to do is accessing tuples in a tuple that we have created. There are two methods of accessing tuples. If you want to access a single element, then we use indexing. If you want to get a range of elements, then we use slicing. So, for example, we can decide to do this to access the first element of a tuple using indexing. Here, you create a tuple using parentheses method, and we can print out the first element, which is this one. Remember, in Python, indexing starts from 0. So this will be index 0, index 1, and index 2. So to get this, to get the first element, then we use indexing method. So this one will return the first element. We can go ahead and print that out. And we can also use indexing if you want to access a range of elements in a tuple. And for example, you can do this. We can access a range of elements in a tuple using slicing. And for slicing, you specify the start index and the end index. So remember, since indexing starts from 0, this will be index 0, index 1. So the first element will be 2. And then the last element in this will be 3, which is in index 2. Which means since we don't include the end index when slicing, then we are going to get the elements 2 and 3. And we can go and execute that. You get another tuple with elements 2 and 3. And that's basically how you access tuple elements. The next thing we look at is the tuple methods. The first method is if you want to count the number of occurrence of a value in a tuple, then we use the count method. So count method is one of two methods that we have in Python for tuples. So basically what this will do, will count the occurrence of 3 in that tuple. A simple count returns at 3. We have 1, 2, and 3. So if we decide to execute this, we get 3, which is true. And the next method inbuilt method that we have in Python for tuple is if you want to get the index of a number, of a value, then we use the index method. Basically, this will help you in finding the index of a value in a tuple. So in this case, we want to check the first occurrence of the value 3, which is index 0, 1, and 2. So this is index 2. So that's what we expect. We can go ahead and execute that. We get index 2. And basically that's all we have for the inbuilt functions that we can use for tuples. And actually I can even go ahead and show you that. We have our tuple to be t. If you type in a dot and hit tab in your keyboard, you see we have only two methods for tuples. I hope that is clear. So I'll go ahead and just delete that cell. The next thing we are going to look at is how to unpack tuple elements. And you can use tuple unpacking to assign the elements of a tuple to separate variables. For example, suppose that you have a tuple with elements 1, 2, and 3. So if you wanted to assign those elements to a single, to individual variables, we use this assignment A, B, C equal to T. Basically what this will do, A will be assigned the value 1, B will be assigned the value 2, and C will be assigned the value 3. So suppose we wanted to print out to confirm if that happens. So that will be, we print out the value of the variable A. We can also print out the variable B, and we can also print out the variable C. If I execute this, you get the values 1, 2, and 3 in that order, because this will be the variable A, B, and C in that order. So basically meaning that the tuple has been unpacked to these separate variables. The next thing we are going to look at is tuple comparison. Suppose we have several tuples that we want to compare. And suppose now, for example, you have 3 tuples. You have tuple 1, tuple 2, and tuple 3 with different elements. And you wanted to see if tuple 1 or tuple 2, or you can say tuple 1 is less than tuple 2. What we do, we use the common standard, or we use the standard comparison operators: less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or less than, or less than or equal to, or not equal to. So to see if tuple 1 is less than tuple 2, we can print that out. We use T1 is less than T2. What this will do, it will just return true or false. Let's see what happens. If I execute that, I get the value, the Boolean true. What that means is that these two elements, these two tuples have been compared element-wise, which means the first element will be compared to the first element of the second tuple. This will be compared to that, and this will be compared to that. If it happens that one of the elements when they're being compared is greater than, then that will be false. If it happens that all the elements except maybe this one is less than this value, then we return true. So normally what happens is that the first element will be compared to the first element of the second tuple. And if it's equal to, then we go to the next pair, 2 and 2, they are equal. If they are equal, then it's going to go to the third one and compares. And since 3 is less than 4, then it's going to return true. So that's how you do that. If you wanted to check if the elements are equal, if the tuples are equal, we can use that. Or you might also want to check if the the tuples are not equal. Then if I decide to run this, you find that they're all true. I can change this a bit and say, suppose now we change these to maybe greater than, and execute the cell. You find that it's true, false, true, true, because this has been violated at this point. Because this is greater than this, then it's going to return false. And the next thing we are going to look at is tuple concatenation and repetition. And suppose we have two tuples and we wanted to concatenate the two. Then what we do, we use a plus sign to do that. So to concatenate the two, we say T3, we are creating a new tuple. T3 is assigned T1 plus T2. So if I execute that and print out, I see that T3 has the elements of T1 and elements of T2. Now, we might also want to do some repetition. You want to repeat the tuple a number of times. So if you want to repeat that, then you can say T4, tuple 4 is assigned T1 repeated 3 times. So let's see what we get. We get tuple 1 repeated 3 times. I hope that is clear. The next thing we are going to look at is tuple membership. You can use the in and not in operators to check if the value is present in a tuple. For example, suppose that you have a tuple with 3 elements, and you want to check if a value 1 is present in that tuple. Then that will basically return either true or false. So in this case, checking that returns a true. Similarly, you might decide to check if a value 4 is in the tuple. So what happens is that Python will come and check if any of these values in that tuple is equal to 4. And if it's not contained in that, then it's going to return, let's see, it's going to return either false or yes, or false or true. And in this case, since 4 is not contained in that, then it's going to return false. And suppose we use not in in our statement. So suppose now we check if value 4 is not in our tuple T. Let's see what we get. We get true. What this means is that 4 is not in T. So we expect, since that is true, the statement is true, then we're going to have Python prints out true. The next thing we are going to look at is tuple iteration. In Python, we have different we call them loops that we can use to iterate over elements of a tuple. In this case, we can use a for loop. Suppose now we have a tuple T with elements 1, 2, and 3. And suppose now we want to iterate through all these lists, this tuple, these elements 1, 2, 3, which takes the index 0, 1, 2. So to do that, we use a for loop. So a for loop is simply written as for items in our tuple T. We want to print all the elements called items. So item. So basically what this will do, it will iterate over these values or the elements in that and print each individually. So if I execute this is what we get. So we have the values or the items in that tuple printed individually, and that's basically how you can iterate through a tuple. The next thing we do is we can look at tuple sorting. And for tuple sorting, we have to keep this in mind. Since tuples are immutable, it means that you cannot modify their elements. However, you can sort the elements of a tuple and create a new tuple with the sorted elements. You cannot change this exact. For example, suppose now we have a tuple with elements 3, 2, and 1. And you wanted to sort these elements in ascending order. So here you have to create a different tuple from these elements, and you make sure you use the function sorted. Sorted will basically sort that list in ascending order, and the tuple function will convert that list into a tuple. And maybe just to demonstrate how that is, I can unpack this. And suppose now I decide to print this sorted T. If I print out this, I get a list. So this will basically convert the tuple into a list. And now you assign that list, you have to convert that list back to tuple. That's why we're using the tuple function. We can go ahead and print out the new tuple. So if I print out this, I get the list that has been created by using the sorted function, and I get the list converted back to tuple. The next thing we are going to look at is tuple aliasing. When you assign a tuple to a new variable, a new tuple object is created and the new variable points to the new object. Any changes made to the tuple through the new variable will not affect the original tuple. Note that in Python, tuple aliasing does not occur. We can demonstrate that. For example, suppose we had a variable tuple t1, and we have another variable t2, another tuple assigned to t1, and we want to check if T1 is equal to T2. So you can print T1, use the comparison operators equal, and T2. If I print this out, you see that it's true, simply because a tuple T1 was assigned to T2. So both of them are the same. And suppose now we make some changes to T2 by assigning it to a different tuple. If now I print out the same T1 to check if T1 and T2 are the same, then we end up getting, if I print this out, you find it's true and false, because any change to T2 does not affect the original tuple. And that's a clear evidence that tuple aliasing does not happen. And the next thing we are going to look at is tuple immutability. As mentioned earlier, tuples are immutable, which means that you cannot modify the elements once they have been created. This can be useful property when you need to store data that should not be changed. However, if you need to modify a tuple, you can create a new tuple with the modified elements. For example, suppose that you have a tuple T1 with the elements 1, 2, and 3. And you want to modify the tuple. How do you do it? So what you do, you just create a new tuple, and you want to change the first element, which takes index 1. So basically what you do, you just change the first element. So it's basically you're creating a tuple with 4, don't put anything there, and then you add. You use plus, you use plus to concatenate it with now sliced with a sliced tuple, or a tuple that has been sliced from the original one. So in this case, we can get T, and then we use the square brackets, and then we start from index 1 all the way to the end. So you don't have to specify the end index. So if I decide now to print our tuple T, this is what you get. You get, if we execute this, we get 4, 3, 4, 2, 3. And that's basically, you've changed this to 4 and sliced the original tuple to get 2 and 3 and concatenate them to the new, to this tuple which had the elements 4 only. So as we've seen, that we have created a new tuple with the modified elements of the original tuple. I hope that is clear. The next thing we are going to look at is other operations that you can perform in Python. So there are quite a few. The first one we can look at is if you want to get the length of a tuple. If you're going to get the length of a tuple, so basically the number of elements you have in the tuple, we can just simply print it out. So print length of a tuple. If you want to get them the maximum or the minimum, we simply use this function. For minimum, we use min, and for maximum, we use max. Have it there. And if you want to get the sum of all elements in the tuple, then we use the sum function. So these are basically functions that you can use to get all this, and there are very many of them. So if I can execute that, we get this, which means we don't have our tuple, and we can simply create it in a different way. So before this, we can simply create a tuple by first defining the elements. So first you say x is assigned value 1, y is assigned 2, and z is assigned the value 3. And then now you can create a variable, a tuple variable with those variables. So if I create this, then and execute now, we get these are the values because you're getting the length. So the length of that tuple is 3. The minimum of x, y, z, of course, we get is x, which has the value 1. And to get the maximum, of course, it's z with value 3. So we return the value 3. And the sum is basically the sum of this, of the 3 values, is 1 plus 2 plus 3. And we get 6. So there are so many other things that you can do with tuples, but for now, I think you have all it takes to manipulate tuples in Python. Thank you for watching and for following. Hopefully everything is clear. But if something is not clear, please remember to post it on the comment section. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part of this Python programming tutorial. And please do remember to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell